I'm here in Costa Rica at Montezuma at the beach, and there's some beautiful waves going on, so I'm going to do some painting, and I'll show you how to make watercolor paintings of the ocean and the waves and the rocks. And I'm going to use my watercolor paper, which I've already taped to a piece of cardboard. I'm going to use my watercolor paper, which I've already taped to a piece of cardboard. You tape it around the edge, about 1/4 inch around, so it doesn't stretch out of place, and when you're finished you'll have a nice little frame around it. I have my watercolor paints here with a whole bunch of different colors. I have water in a yogurt pot I just got out of the ocean. I have my brushes, different sizes, and I also brought some pencils and some watercolor pencils that I bought on my trip to Italy. So I'm going to get started doing my painting. So I'll start by putting some water on my paint that I need. I'm going to use sort of a sky blue, magenta, and yellow. And I'll just get a little bit of yellow, really watery. Do like a little wash like that in the sky. And get a little bit of blue. Do a little wash in the sky. And then I'll get a little bit of magenta. Very watery to the horizon. Now that's way too much magenta, so I'll wet my brush and get some of that off. It's kind of hard to paint and videotape at the same time. And then you just want to really wet your brush and blend it all together. Now I'm just going to draw the rocks in with pencil, a watercolor pencil. I'll be putting some ocean in, sort of in between the sky and the rock, but I'm just going to kind of draw out the shape of the rock. That's what I'll be doing there. So I want to really be more looking at the rocks than at my hand to get sort of a nice free flow of a line. So I'm actually right now not looking at the camera, or I'm not looking at my paper, I'm looking at the rock and following the line. Every now and then you can look down at your paper just to check you're not out of control. And then I'll see, it kind of breaks into 2 rocks, so I want to make sure I leave space for the little creek to come in. So then I'm going to just kind of follow that line that I see. I could do it quite loosely. I could lift my pencil now and then to make it lighter, and I could push my pencil down every now and then to make it darker. And see it, the water comes in a little kind of creek. So now I'm going to go down here and just draw it out like that, how I see it. It could be really rough. It doesn't really matter. How's it going? Good. And then from that point, I'm going to do 2 little lines in the rock, like that. I'm going to actually go into this later, but now I want to put some gobs of paint on there, and I'm going to scrunch up a piece of saran wrap to make a nice little texture. So now I'm going to splotch on some blobs of color. I've got some ochre, a little bit of brown, sort of whatever I see in the rock. Sometimes it's really hard to see, but you have to kind of use your imagination. So I'm going to put a bit of brown, then I'll put some Payne's gray, which is my go-to color for a lot of things. So it's kind of like a bluish gray type of thing. If you see some even reflections from the sky, you could put a bit of magenta. You kind of have to stretch your your imagination to see what colors you actually see in there. So once I have a rough mock-up of my colors, while it's still wet, in fact that might be a little too wet, I could dab up a little bit if it looks too wet. So while it's still wet, you want to get the plastic, the saran wrap, actually stick it on the rock, and you're going to squish it in. So my hands are really sweaty here, so I'm actually going to hold it down with a paper. The idea is that the saran wrap's all squished up. It's going to make lines in the rock. So we're going to do this side, and then we're going to do the same thing on this side, and then I'm going to attack the water. So while that's drying, I want to kind of do the effect of the waves pushing against the rocks. So I'll see if you can see when they crash up against the rock how it looks. There we go. So it's like a big splash of the white coming up over the rock. So what I'm going to do for that, because I don't have white paint, so I'll just wet the area on the paper without adding paint. And then I'll add the paint above it. We'll get some blue. That's a little crazy bright, so I'm going to dull it down a bit. A little bit of the Payne's gray. Oh, that's better. Smooth it down a bit. And there's even a bit of green in there, but I think I'll do the green separate. So I'll get a bit of green going there at the side. It's too green, so I'll just add a little bit more blue in there to dull it down again. Okay, so there, what we want to do is put our blue and a bit of green in a horizon line. So just below where the pink is, put a little horizon line, as straight as possible. And then as you go down towards where I wet the paper, in fact I'm going to clean my brush and wet it again because it's really dry here. So I'm just going to wet that area again. Okay, and then as we put the blue towards it, it'll bleed into it without actually painting it. So it's making little bleedy marks, so it gives it a little bit of effect of having an uneven, splashy edge to the wave. And then we can continue adding our blue ocean. Now the wave isn't over all of the rocks, so I'll just kind of keep it to that area there, and then the blue will go right to this rock here. Okay. I'm going to clean my brush again and just kind of blend that edge a bit with water. Okay, so we've got a little bit of an effect of the splash, and then I want to do, you see the water actually has little lines in it, so I want to get some blue greens, go into here, do a little bit of detail, but probably what I'm going to do is wait till it dries a bit because it's just bleeding all together right now. So what I could go in and do after is I'll go in with my pencils or my brush and do some little lines in there. So now for the magic, I'm going to take the saran wrap off the painting, and you'll see what a very cool effect it has made to create the look of the rocks. So now all I have to do is paint in the little stream coming in there, maybe clean up the little outlines with a watercolor pencil, and I'll be good to go. So I'm back in Montreal now, and I have to finish this piece. So I'm going to show you the last steps of finishing the landscape. And I have all my materials here. I'm going to need my paints and these watercolor pencils here. So we're just going to go ahead and wet the paints a little bit to get the colors that I need. I just have them down here below, like the same ones I had in Costa Rica. So I'm just going to get my paints that I need, make a color, and then for the stream, I'm going to just kind of go along like that and just wing it like that. I don't have my photograph handy, so I'm just going to wing it a little bit. But you can actually go from your photos if you want it to be a little more precise. So there we go, we're just going to go in like that. Okay. Like that. And then around here, if you want a little bit of a shadow underneath the wave, I'll get my blue with a little bit of the Payne's Gray, which is my go-to color for darkening up things to make them a little bit shadowy. So if you need to take some of the color off, you just use your little towel like that. So you might want a little bit shadowy under where the wave is. Okay, so we do a little bit shadowy under there. It's just landing on the rock. Okay, so I'm going to go like that, a little bit shadowy. And then up here, what I actually want to do is I'm going to use the watercolor pencil to define the wave a little bit. So that's going to be my last step. Do a little bit of a shadow here. And then I've got my watercolor pencils. I have black and blue. And actually here's one that's finished. So that shows you the idea of how it's done. And I'm just going to kind of go with that idea. I'm just going to do a little kind of loose wiggly line. Sometimes you push hard, sometimes you push softly. It's good if you have to fix it up, just use your watercolor, your water, just to, if you want to lift anything off, you can use the water to kind of erase any bits that are in error. And then we want to kind of define the wave a little bit. It's kind of a little bit curly. If you want to do some bubbles, you could kind of do little loose lines to make kind of bubble-like things. There we go. And you can lift your pencil off completely if you want it to be a little more natural looking. You don't want it to be too perfect. And then here too, we can define the lines a little bit like that. So here's the finished painting with all the little lines defined. I did some little lines to show that the water's streaming in and the little bubbles splashing up from the rocks. So now the final touch is you have to remove the tape, and we actually pull the tape away from the picture so we don't rip the watercolor paper. So we're just going to remove all the tape, and it's really great to have it taped down because not only does it prevent the paper from buckling, but it creates a really lovely border for your picture. And so you actually don't even have to mat it when you frame it. You could just frame it like this and it has a nice little border on it. So we're just going to very carefully pull the tape away from the picture. So what I would do is I would sign it. I usually, if I make a card, I just mount it on a little greeting card, or you could just frame it as is. And this one I actually put on a piece of folded watercolor paper, so it's all ready to go as a card. And there you have a lovely little souvenir of your trip. So happy painting!